We're struggling to make sure that executive leadership doesn't see us as this abstract, nice to have thing. We can't be the vitamin supplement. We have to be the critical course of treatment for survival. And I think the more that we're able to frame that conversation in terms of the value that we're bringing in multiple departments and at the overall visibility and leadership level, the more successful we can be in our profession.
Welcome to the Digital Community Leaders Podcast, where we chat with community experts, uncovering insights and leaving you with practical takeaways. Today we're joined by Todd Nilson, the founder of Clocktower Advisors. Clocktower Advisors builds online communities for B2B enterprises and non-profit organizations that deepen trust, increase customer loyalty, engage stakeholders, empower employees, and unleash new product ideas. I can't wait to chat to Todd about all things community. Let's get started. We are Steadfast Collective. We exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. A team of smart creatives, we are excited by technology, and we always aim to leave the internet in a better place than we found it. Working with many of the UK's leading communities, we use technology as an accelerator to help them grow and engage their members. Our applications resource membership organisations, grow businesses, and create value. We know what it takes to ship, market, and scale applications, and we apply this wealth of background knowledge to everything we do. We're not just another agency, we are community builders. Hey Todd, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Pete. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm excited to be chatting to yourself and hearing all about what you've been up to. How's your 2025 going so far?
It's been good. Lots of different things, I think, coming to fruition this year after a couple of years of heavy toil. So I'm very hopeful for 2025, despite the weird political and social climate that we live in.
That is definitely a good place to go. But yeah, no, it's been good. It's good to catch up and chat, and I'm excited to talk about what we are going to talk about. Why don't we get started? Why don't you tell me a little bit about Clocktower and what you're doing there?
So Clocktower Advisors is my primary consulting fractional work vehicle for community strategy. And I started it back in 2015 after I had left a agency called Seven Summits that was doing a lot of community build out and implementation work. I knew I loved community work from the time that I went into that agency, and I left because I wanted a little bit more control over my schedule and wanted to really kind of go my own direction with things. And so took off from that. It really started accidentally because I had the opportunity to do work with Richard Millington from Fever Bee at that time. And he was in the UK, I was in the US. I needed some kind of clean way taxably to work with him. And so I just set up the LLC. And I gave it the name at the time because I like the idea of the Clocktower as being sort of like this center of social life for the idea of the town. And it was a technology, however, that was sort of regulatory, but sort of faded to the background. So like life happens around the Clocktower, but it's not all about the Clocktower itself. And so I thought that was kind of cool. And if I ever did more beyond, what I was doing with Richard at the time, I would have a vehicle for it. And so worked about a year and a half with Richard, had some really great projects with him, and then ended up working more on my own after that. And so with Clocktower, I help primarily B2B and nonprofits build social community strategies, around technology, solutions. So, usually enterprise community platforms is the space that I work in more often than not, although I am pretty darn familiar with a lot of the other smaller platforms or medium platforms that are out there as well. I love the space, and I've never gotten tired of working with new customers or sticking around with old customers and helping them find their way through engagement challenges, technology challenges, kind of just finding ways to bring people together and create trust.
What was the role looking back, where community was the focus of it rather than marketing or leadership or sales or something? When did community become like a word you were using as part of your job?
Oh, certainly when I joined Seven Summits,
Mhm.
that was what they were about. They were doing a lot of Jive implementations back in the day when Jive was still a viable platform. And yeah, going into that organization, that was a career pivot for me. I had been working in recruiting for many years before that. I was a tech recruiter, liked that work, very much, but I was hungry for a little bit something more. And excuse me, and I realized that a lot of what was going on with social, a lot of the
Mm,
things that I was doing in my spare time in gaming communities, with discussion forums and IRC chat and, wikis, um, was something that I hadn't put a name on yet. But then as soon as
mm.
I came into Seven Summits, that really kind of opened up that world of community building via online platforms for me.
Nice. My first kind of interest in digital communities was an online gaming thing. It was for a very niche product called the Gizmondo. And I remember spending just so much time in that forum and then being like, I wonder how this forum's built. Oh, it's using vBulletin. Oh,
That was mine too.
yeah, and you just kind of and then you're like, oh, how does this forum work? And then you kind of threw one online. You were like, whoa, this has got a lot of spam. How am I going to deal with that? And then you kind of find yourself, and then I went into web development, and yeah, it's funny how we all quite often. It's amazing how gaming has got its roots in so many CMs backgrounds.
Absolutely. And there are few more intense crucibles than
Yeah,
gaming communities out there.
definitely.
People care deeply about games that they're sinking a lot of time into. That's like it's an economy and an emotional labor all its own.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I want to talk about that tech recruitment thing for a while. As someone who's worked with many a tech recruiter, there's an art to it. It's a real finessing. You need to finesse both the candidate, making sure they're prepped, making sure they're great for the role, making sure that they're gonna go for as much salary as you can. Then you've then got to finesse the employer. They're going to want as low a salary as you can. There's a lot of finessing there and a lot of people skills, and I would argue quite a lot of hospitality to make sure everyone feels comfortable before they ultimately go for this meeting, and hopefully you've made a great pairing. I would imagine there's quite a few transferable skills in what you're now doing now.
I've always found it to be so. I think that like you were basically managing community at a micro level.
Mm,
If you can do those one-on-one relationships, if you can create rapport and trust with the people that are entrusting you with their background, their resume, and their interests, that you're going to accurately represent them to a customer and building trust with that customer that you are accurately representing these candidates for a
mm.
job to them. I've frequently joked about this on other podcasts or streams. Or anytime someone bends my ears, over a beer, that I've always found that recruiting was the best combination of being a bartender, bounty hunter, and psychoanalyst that you could find out there. And of course, these are transferable skills to
Yeah.
community building.
And recruitment really is also the weather vane of how the economy is doing. And a recruiter will be the first to tell you how they think the economy is going because they really feel it when it's booming and it's struggling.
Sure, sure. But they're a kind of a canary in the coal mine, if you want to think of that as a metaphor for it. Like they're the first to get released if companies are not
Yeah.
hiring, and they're the first to tell you if companies are being really picky, if like there's a market slowdown that's happening. Like you can usually tell what's happening, and you can tell by the level of intensity, emotional angst, from the job seekers as well. Like you get a lot of that. I don't envy the job of recruiters right now because I think the AI world has introduced some stunningly bad complications to doing that job well.
I agree. I also would not want to be a recruiter right now. It is a tough market to be in right now. But anyway, what is not a tough market? I am keen to chat to you about your experience working with these kind of B2B customers and other various communities. And I think we'll start off, here. I often see from afar, communities launch and just struggle to get momentum, struggle to get that kind of pace they need until they kind of hit that point where things are really flying. Is there any standout things or mistakes you see community managers or founders making time and time again when kind of setting things up?
I used to call those mistakes. In
Learnings.
whenever I would do like a pitch deck, for a customer and kind of talk through it, I flipped that script and I call them their success factors to take
Okay.
into consideration when you are building a community. Because the reason that somebody hires somebody like me as a strategist, as a consultant, is to help them see around corners, like to de-risk that process of setting up a community and to help ensure that they have every opportunity
Mm,
to hit the ground, running, be able to implement faster, move faster once the community is launched, and then keep it under management, more effectively as they go. So I think I've tracked, 7 or 8 of those, and I'm never going to remember them off the top of my head. I usually have to have a slide in front of me because I have terrible long-term memory for stuff like that. But I will say, like, the biggie that I run into again and again is um, spend less time worrying about the technology and more time
yes.
worrying about who you're going to put into the community management role there. Like the,
Yeah.
the tech is great. It's not what's at fault, when a community fails 9 times out of 10. It's more often than not that you didn't put the right operational team in
Yeah.
place to make sure that everything's successful, or you didn't put anybody in place at all,
Yeah. Yeah.
or horrifyingly, maybe you're trying to do it all with AI, which I think would be a huge mistake, to do. I don't think anyone's making that mistake
Not yet.
just yet. Um, Give it time.
Last month, I released a video on LinkedIn, which was I think my opening line was, as somebody who sells technology, technology is not the answer to all of your problems. It won't fix your pipeline issues. It's not going to fix your engagement issues. It's purely an accelerator of already established processes.
Amen.
And,
Yeah.
and that's basically it. Like, it's not going to fix all your problems. And I'm here trying to sell it. And I can already tell you it's not going to fix your problems. It's just the tool, right? It's just the tool.
It's a tool, and I increasingly try to frame it because a lot of my work is framing to help people think, more clearly about this stuff. I always try to emphasize that the technology is not the community. Like,
Mm,
we'll often refer to that as like, oh, go to the community and do this, and that it's misleading terminology
yeah.
to even refer to it offhandedly as that. Like, it is the community platform.
Mm,
In other words, it is the building that I have created for people to join together in,
mm,
hopefully where it's designed in such a way that it helps them maybe mingle a little more effectively, or find private conversations or groups a little bit more effectively, or get stuff done
mm,
that they want to do a little bit better. But it's nothing more than a structure to try to put people together in. And there are structures that are fit to the purpose of a
mm,
given community, and that there does need to be design and intentionality in that process. But um, you know, can I build a community without a community platform? Yeah, you probably can. It probably is a space for that. There's a networking group, for example, that I belong to, called the Connective, which, um, as nearly as I can tell, the community is built around biweekly Zoom calls, and everybody gets in, shares what they're working on. Um, they they do have like they're using a tool called Swarm for kind of, interaction. They've got sort of like a sales CRM that's like, it's like a social sales CRM where you can do referral bonuses, if somebody refers you to another project. But do they have a community platform? No, there's nothing there. Like, they have some LinkedIn pods, but I would still argue it is a community because there is a sense of belonging to the space. There's a distinct identity there. As 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 community technology professionals like you and I, we might grit our teeth a little bit and say, but where's the rediscoverability of
mm,
knowledge? Like, where's the knowledge capture? Where's the persistence of conversation in those spaces? Well, it doesn't exist in that particular world. Not to say that it wouldn't benefit, from
mm.
having those things, but doesn't need them. It's getting by without it.
We are definitely in agreement. I agree wholeheartedly what you're saying. I'm also going to say replatforming is tough. Like I've seen communities struggle to replatform. It can be expensive. It can be costly. In terms of engagement and literal dollars. So it's also not a decision to be taken lightly. But when you're making that decision, you shouldn't expect whatever your new solution is to solve your problems. I think it's that shiny thing mentality, isn't it? It's often, you might get a pitch from a new startup or whatever it is, and you think, oh, they've got this shiny new thing, and it might be shiny, but it's not going to fix your problem. So while I agree that the technology isn't the community, it's also not something to take lightly, because changing it every year is going to be a real pain in the ass.
Oh, you absolutely don't want to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, to go back to the architecture metaphor, I live in a
Mm,
little town in Wisconsin. There was, long before I lived here, a high school, which was an old, charming building at the end of Main Street, in town. And as I talk to natives, the folks who have been around here for their entire lives, they speak with great longing and nostalgia for that building, which was, I think, falling apart. It was not a very good, like, it was a well structured building, but it was like drafty, and there were problems with the heating plant, and all the things that go wrong with the building as it gets older. And
mm,
then they decided that they would wreck that building and build a new one on the outskirts of town.
mm,
And it's shocking how many people, how many hearts and minds were lost when they decided to build this high school, on the edge of town that was no longer at the center of communal life.
mm,
It kind of wrenched the architecture of the city a little bit, into
mhm,
like the ecosystem of that space. We go through the same things when we think about replatforming a community. People get established there. If you've done your job and they feel that sense of belonging in that space, they're going to feel the pain of wrenching into a new platform situation every time. And like, that's, you have to do the change management around that to kind of bring as many of them around as possible, but you're still going to lose some of that momentum when you
mm.
when you make those changes.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. Your town has the story of the school. My town is obsessed with an ice rink that existed 50 years ago. And every year there's an article in the daily paper about why the local council won't bring back the ice rink. It's funny how people latch onto these things of nostalgia, but also, that's a city. There's a city planning thing there as well, isn't there? Of, was maybe that was the best place for the high school, but actually maybe it wasn't. And actually, those things, like cities are designed, communities also need to be intentionally designed, which was what my theme was at when I talked at CMX. Okay, let's roll on to the next question. So you're working with a client, and things are going well, and then they hit maybe a patch of low engagement. Now, I know the answer isn't just start being really noisy and coming up with loads of ideas and trying to make people, fun Fridays, that sort of stuff. But what are some genuine methods you've seen where you can start to re-spark engagement and interest in the community, which isn't just your short-term fluff?
Yeah. So first of all, when I 100% agree, you don't just start flailing about with lots of different activities, hoping that something's going to stick. That's the spaghetti methodology. You throw a bunch
Mm,
of spaghetti at the wall, and you hope some of it sticks and works. Um, and I know there's a school of thought, where people will say, just try a lot, place a lot of small bets and fail fast. I'm not a great subscriber, to that point of view around it. I think what you do when you see a slowdown in activity in community, you slow down with it, and you start listening more closely and watching, what the behaviors are, the people that are still in the community.
mm,
You start to watch the people that have gone away, and maybe start trying some outreach, and maybe even try to do some listening sessions or some one-on-one conversations. Try the best you can. It's not always easy in those situations when interest is fading, but you need to figure out what factors have changed that have
mm,
caused that momentum to slow down or stop entirely. It may be something in the broader ecosystem that's happened, if you're a B2B organization, maybe something's happened in the industry that needs to be responded to. Maybe it's something that maybe it is a technology problem with your platform. People hate it. Like they don't want to be on Slack anymore. They would much rather be anywhere but there. Or maybe it's that the members of the community don't feel like they've been listened to. Maybe there was a blow up. Maybe there's a lot of different factors. But how can you plan any kind of activity to reignite interest if you don't have a beat on what exactly was happening in the first place? So you need to pause and assess, and then maybe try to make some small bets of some things to work out. Um, I've seen that kind of crop up again and again in communities, and it is possible to reignite. Once you understand, what those drivers are, the problems people are trying to solve, the goals they're trying to reach, the things that are in it for them to be part of that community. And sometimes it's just a matter of there not being enough value
Mm,
for them in your community. That's a hard truth to face. But if it's not close enough to what those members needed, they're going to go do other stuff, because they'll say, well, yeah, it's nice. If you're a nice to have and not a must have,
mm,
they're probably not going to, like, with all the demands that are on our time right now, they're probably not going to get
yeah.
involved. And so turning that around has got to be giving them something incredibly valuable that they couldn't get anywhere else.
Have you ever experienced, I know I have as a consumer, I'm wondering if you as a consultant, the opposite, where it's so noisy that no one's getting any value from it? I'll give you the example. So Kevin Rose is relaunching dig.com, which is like a Reddit kind of alternative.
I'm in
And
there. I'm in the community. Yeah.
great, me too. It's carnage.
Yeah.
It's based on Circle. I entered it, and the chat, you couldn't even read it. It was just like, and I was like, and I was getting email updates from almost every post. I was like, I have no interest in going back into this space because it is just carnage. How can you? That feels like that was a technology problem where it hasn't been set up correctly.
I logged in, and I immediately had the same reaction as you. I was like, this is overwhelming. I'm out of
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
I just stopped.
Yeah.
Like, it's nice that there's all those enthusiastic diggers. I don't know what they call
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Groundbreaking.
Groundbreakers, I think they call.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But uh, yeah, so that's not an uncommon happening in Slacks and
Yeah.
Discords as well, where there's a proliferation of channels. There's just a pervasive fear of missing out, or a sense of
Mm,
dislocation of, I don't know where to begin. And like, it's why I generally don't like those chat based platforms when you get beyond 20, 30 people,
yeah.
because it just gets too noisy. There's too much chatter going on. I'm an advisor for, and I like the Fractionals United community, which is based out of Slack, but I would wish to high heaven that they would get out of Slack.
Mm,
I don't like it as a platform, particularly now since their model is pay or we kill your data after 90 days.
yeah.
That for me was a reason I moved the community consultants collective, along with our board, off of Slack and into another platform, Disco, because there was no persistence of
Yeah.
information. And it was, and it's just kind of lumped in with everybody else. Like, I don't know how many Slacks you're on, but I've
I'm
probably
quite
got
picky.
about upwards of 15 in my app I'm looking at right now.
No, I'm quite picky. I've got no more than 5, but it's true, and I do. I would love to see inside of. There are some. I imagine like there's. I imagine like I don't know if Meta are. So there'll be some big brands who are using Slack. I think IBM recently moved over to Slack. I would love to see how they set up those channels, because unless you're paying top dollar for their business plan and you get their AI features, there's no summaries. You go away for a week, you come back, and you basically just have to mark all as read. It's impossible to catch up.
Overwhelming.
Um,
Overwhelming.
and
Yes.
their AI tools are very good. They're just very expensive, and that for most communities, they're not going to spend $30 a user, so they get those tools. So if that, so back to the thing we're talking about is when there's so much noise, it's almost pointless. That feels like a technology thing where maybe it is either time to replatform or time to split into more groups, or maybe you need to cohort this thing, or maybe you need more channels, whatever it is, but it needs more management. That's what it needs.
Yeah, you've named some really powerful ways to try to address those kinds of issues, or maybe very clearly having an onboarding set of emails that kind of direct you where to go. First of
Mm.
all, or things to try. I like the cohorts idea because then you've got sort of a small manageable group that they
Yeah,
can kind of band together and feel like they're encountering that space together
yeah,
for the first time. But yeah, it's otherwise it's overwhelming.
yeah.
This happens with enterprise platforms as well, very frequently, where a leadership team, especially with like B2B SaaS companies,
Mm.
um, they want to have like a space for every product or every feature and its stepson, and I'm always sort of like trying to be the person to gently, diplomatically tell them that it's going to be a ghost town
Mm.
if you try to launch with all of those channels or all of those groups to message. Really kind of I'm a huge fan of emergent design. Like you start with a core or with things that you think are going to be useful, interesting, more likely to get engagement, and then you build out as those conversations emerge or as they kind of spin off into other things. It it feels more messy, it's more organic, but communities are organic things. They're not mechanistic things. You can't
Mm.
just shove them through a sausage grinder, and hope that that people are going to continue to want to engage in them in the same way. So I'm I'm very much of that school of thought that like limiting those channels as much as
Yeah.
possible in the early days are critical to success.
For sure. And I think we touched on briefly there, like, introducing new things. There is something to be said as well for there being a level of friction in your design. Actually, friction isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe the onboarding process shouldn't be one click. Maybe there should be a few steps to make sure people actually do want to be part of this thing and don't just rampage in not knowing what they're going into. Maybe they haven't read the code of conduct, etc. And I think that friction can also be said for when you're introducing new initiatives, maybe new channels, maybe new areas, maybe new technologies. Actually, if you've got your advocates, your superstars, your whatever you're calling them, running it past them, it's an extra level of friction. It's not necessary that you don't legally report to them, but actually adding that level of friction, they'll go, you know what, we don't want that integration. Actually, I don't think that integration is going to go down well with this group of people. And I think sometimes friction is a positive thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was thinking again to our example earlier with Dig's groundbreaker
Yeah.
community. One of the friction points they added in there was a $5 entry fee. Like you're
Mhm.
basically buying a ticket to ride and
Yeah.
go into that space. At the moment, I kind of want my $5 back, but you know what? I like the idea of supporting them and what they're trying to resurrect with Dig as a technology. But that's one of those things. I think having an actual application instead of joining the community right away is not a bad way to convey the value or create, put a little friction in there. Like,
Mhm.
hey, we don't just let everybody in. We need to make sure that you're a good match. And particularly things like communities of practice. That's a pretty usual
Yeah.
thing. Like there's a bar to be met. You need to have, you need to be affiliated with a university if you're going to join this community of practice. Sure, that makes sense to me. We'll make some one-off exceptions. If you are a captain of industry or someone that we really want in the space to be involved, but kind of throw a few little roadblocks in there. Membership fees, are another little friction piece, that you drop in. And I think we're kind of at this place where there's a renaissance in thinking about like how do you monetize communities, but not just monetize them, but set them up in a way that people have to pay something so that they perceive the value of what's in
Yes.
there. Like that's a driver. There's a if I'm putting some of my hard-earned money towards being a member of a community space, I'm probably a little bit more likely to be an
Mm.
active participant in that space, or it's going to be on my mind more at least than if I joined and it was easy to join, but like I don't really have any other spurs to make me want to, participate on a regular basis. And people like you and I, like they're in communities every day, like occupational hazard. We belong to probably 50 communities, out there, because that's what we do. We get invited into spaces and people want to ask us about, well, what should I do here? What's going wrong? What's going right? How do I make it better? And so even with prospects, you're often just invited in to look around. And so
Yeah.
you've got the persistent memberships that hang out forever.
I would find the same with events, even just having a small donation or some sort of cost. It decreases your no show rate, which is always positive. If something's free, it's so easy not to attend. If you've paid £20 to attend, you're more likely to show up, even if that money is being donated and it's still non-profit sort of event.
There are so many events to choose from. I go through that on almost a daily basis. Like I'll sign up with the very best of intentions to attend an event,
Mm.
and I find that like something's come up in my schedule or there's another responsibility that's come up, and I say, well, I don't have to be there. I can catch it on the replay, right? And then you're stuck. Like and it's hard to build that sense of uh, camaraderie and connection, in there as well. Like I helped run a webinar event for one of my customers the other day, and through struggle in actually quite a large community and quite a large email base and text base that they have, we only had like 41 people sign up for the webinar, and then we had like two show up.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking,
Yeah.
and it's not at all uncommon, right now, even though like the content that we had and the speakers we had were quite good. And we felt it was a good value proposition for it. We didn't ask for any money for it. Maybe we should have, I don't know.
Yeah, the webinar space is so tough. It's so crowded. I'm going to end with this question, Todd. So, we've just talked about one, but what would you say is the biggest pain point for your average kind of everyday CM at the moment?
I mean, I think there's a couple of pain points, but I'll focus in on the ones that come to mind first. So one is CMs are pretty regularly overwhelmed with being asked to do too much, and I think it's largely because of a lack of understanding of what their role is within the organization. But you kind of have to be the person that is watching and nurturing the community on the front lines of attack. And you also have to be the person who's the internal champion, talking to
Mm,
every other department internally and the leadership team, and making them aware of all the things the community can do to build that. And that's a recipe for mental breakdown if I've ever heard of one. That it's a reason there need to be more diversified and bigger teams for
mm,
community building. But unfortunately, there are a lot of, I'll call them solopreneur CMs, that are out there that are asked to do that, and unfortunately asked also because of a misunderstanding of the role to do all the social media outreach as well, to manage all the analytics, to do 1,000 different tasks that are maybe not
mm.
core to what they signed up for, in the beginning. And so I think people struggle with that on a regular basis.
From what I hear from my my time getting to chat to folk like yourself and folk who've been there and done it for a little while is the easiest and often the quickest way of building out your team is just to prove that you're providing value. And ultimately, as a community manager, if you are a team of one who is overwhelmed, the quicker you can prove your value to the business's end goals, not the goals that are in your head of I want to make a nice, happy space, but ultimately, what do they care about? Is it retention? Is it churn? Is it dollars? Is it bums on seats? Is it brand recognition? If you can align your success with that success, it's much easier to then go to someone, to your CMO or your COO, and say, look, I really do need a second pair of hands now because we have delivered this much value. It's so much easier to do that. It's a lot harder to do if you don't have any data to back that up.
That is so critical. You have to be a bit of an entrepreneur to
Mm,
to do this work, and you're right. There needs to be a clear understanding of the difference between the metrics that make for a healthy community. I could
mm,
have a really wonderful, thriving community with a lot of conversation, but if it's not tied to what the business's
yeah,
goals are,
it's tough.
you're going to be met with a yawn or puzzled looks, or
Mm,
I think the struggle of our time as a practice as community professionals is that we're struggling to make sure that executive leadership
Mm.
doesn't see us as this abstract, nice to have thing. We can't be the vitamin supplement to the company.
Mm.
We have to be the critical course of treatment for survival. And I think the more that we're able to frame that conversation in terms of the value that we're bringing the organization in multiple departments and at the overall visibility and leadership level, the more successful we can be in our profession.
I think that last line is the perfect place to finish. Thank you so much, Todd, for joining me. I really do appreciate your time. Where's the best place for folk to follow along with what you're doing?
So I'll mention clocktoweradvisors.com is my website where I publish recaps of all of my live streams for Talk About Your Community, which broadcasts on LinkedIn and YouTube every other week. You can find the back catalog of interviews on YouTube as well on the Clocktower Advisors channel. You can also learn about my startup, Talent Led, by going to talentled.co, along with my co-lead and that my co-founders, Ilker Akansel and Rachel Petzold. And then finally, if you are a community consultant or want to be, I would also invite you to go to communityconsultants.life, where you can join the Community Consultants Collective. Sorry, that was a mouthful, but there's a lot of
It's
spots.
great. It's great. It's great. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll chat again soon. Thank you. This is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023. And this is the Digital Community Leaders Survey 2023 second edition. Back in 2023, we released a beautiful printed book. And due to its popularity, we sold out of printed copies. Rather than reprinting, we listened to your feedback and we included 40% more content in this copy. We created the report to be a data-backed handbook for building the foundations of your brand's community. For instance, did you know that 70% of communities we surveyed saw growth over the last 12 months? And we know those businesses are growing too. Other metrics we dive into include community growth, biggest pain points, community purpose, what are other community managers measuring, funding, participation, C-suite involvement, and much, much, much more. In this book, we present the data and expert insights from Richard Gott, Michelle Goodall, Vincent Boone, Keen Bakatari, Rosie Sherry, Matt Sullivan, Laura Roth, Nicole Saunders, Blaise Grimes-Vaught, and Jan Carlisle. We've also included frameworks such as the community archetypes, ecosystem of impact, community participation ladder, and the community first culture nexus. There's so much in here, I can't wait for you to get your hands on this new edition. You can order your printed copy from Amazon today, or download a digital copy for free at digitalcommunityleaders.com.